All right, we are live. Welcome everyone to Rev Bytes with your host Doug Truitt, head of revenue success at Rentals United, and myself, John deRoulet, revenue management expert at Wheelhouse, where we'll be having 20 to 30 minute conversations about revenue and distribution topics in the vacation rental and STR spaces. This is our third episode. We're going to talk about multi-channel Navigator. We wanted to take an opportunity to talk about both how channels, affect pricing strategy, but also what's just going to kind of go on. We've had obviously a pretty crazy year for everyone, and some things have shifted in the marketplace that maybe some on the more obvious side for everyone on the channels, but also I know that Doug and people like myself are pretty deep in the weeds, and we wanted to talk about some of those things. But before we get started, let's continue our tradition of starting the episode with a brand new joke KPI. So what do you got for us today, Doug?
So today it was my turn to pick, and so I kind of created. I used to joke about this, but so we all know of Rev Par, but I thought of a good KPI would be Rev Pa with an H instead of the R at the end, which would be revenue per available headache. Because when you think about whether your distribution or your revenue management practices and things, it's kind of like, what if you get a same day booking on the weekend when you're off or something like that, and it was all because of a accidental slip on the minimum advance purchase restrictions that you forgot to apply for certain days of the week or something, or like we've talked about in the past, John, with the you forgot that Mardi Gras changed dates year over year, and you left your rates at $200 when you should have had them at like 600.
Yeah.
So how much
It
is that
sounds like
revenue
a way
worth
for
per
us
headache?
to, yeah. It's like, how can we calculate staffing costs? Because we know with every channel we add or every unit we add, we're adding a number of fail points. And how does
Yeah.
that relate to our staffing costs?
You could also even take it even further and create another metric about how much ibuprofen consumption there's been per company.
Rev Pro.
Rev Pro.
Yeah, so the office manager can evaluate during any season how much ibuprofen to have in the office.
Oh, that's brilliant. I think that would be a great one.
Awesome. Well, let's get started on our conversation.
Yeah.
I think we should kind of start this out. We'll talk about some of the individual channels, but Doug, I know you have a really insider's view. You had a number of great connections and continue to with a lot of these channels, the big channels. And let's talk about what's happened with the channels during COVID. What has been going on in some of these channels? How are they working with property managers now? What has changed, and what should people know about it?
Yeah, I think it's a really fascinating thing. I mean, you think about what happened during COVID, but you almost have to kind of backwards up, check it back to like what happened before COVID, right? When COVID didn't exist and it wasn't a thing that was impacting the travel space and the business, it's kind of like, what were things looking like then? I mean, do people remember back in the days when it was like you didn't have to have a flexible cancellation policy, and you didn't have to have extra cleaning services, and you didn't have to have some of those components to be successful on those channels. And it's kind of amazing to see the type of comforts and the strategies and things that happened pre-COVID in comparison to what today looks like now. I think some of the major shifts and things that highlights that stood out for me during COVID from a distribution or a channel management perspective was, the channels really were struggling just as much as every other, actual property management company was, which is they had to, do furloughs and lay off staff and do things, which caused them to have to reprioritize how they were going to be successful at generating bookings and doing stuff. And a lot of that came to the major themes of like advising people to make sure that they had, their cleanliness, services clearly identified, people putting pictures in the photo galleries of, we do this type of cleaning service and we use this type of sanitizer or this process, or people really extra enhancing or emphasizing on Wi-Fi and internet, because the kind of nomadic traveler type, demographic started to come out, where people were like, I'm just going to go work on the road because I'm working remote, and that kind of thing, or length of stay discounts because people were doing longer length of stays doing that remote working. And so, there was it was a very interesting immediate abrupt shift in the fact of like what things were before and then what things had to change to. And I think the channels had to adapt in a way that tried to make people as successful as possible, whatever bookings they could get. But also at the same time, they were struggling with having to have furloughs and resource management and stuff was tough.
I think that's an interesting point. And there's a couple things I want to come back to on that because they're all good points that I don't even
Yeah.
think we scoped out ahead of time. But
No, we didn't.
uh,
This happens.
with
This is
COVID,
beautiful.
yeah, it's great. So we'll come back to those in a minute. But I think, what you said about going back before COVID and then looking at COVID, these situations with furloughs, layoffs, the changes that are occurring in these organizations. Prior to COVID, the move really was, expanding inventory at all costs. They were spending money to do it. They were, committing a lot of resources between Booking.com, Expedia, Airbnb, all of these channels, VRBO. I think there was a belief that larger companies, Stay Alfred, Saunders, Lyrics, not super large compared to hotels, but there was a lot of interest in directly connecting to these people. All of the smaller PMSs were building their own direct connections.
Yeah.
And I think the belief was that maybe channel managers would start to be cut out, but I'm not sure that that's the case anymore. Can you maybe speak to
No.
us about what you know there?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there definitely was that nature of emphasis of getting direct connections, and I think it had a different, quite a few different layered components with regards to like the channel involvement with the direct, property management companies, some of those larger ones. I mean, some of the channels were actually investing in some of those companies and actually helping some of those companies grow and do things from a capital perspective and other aspects. So I mean, there was that kind of involvement that was happening before COVID as well. I think, to kind of answer plainly with regards to like, the aspect of those channels, like, you know, they they really, from a standpoint of the um, expectation that they laid out with regards to channel management, is that the big companies were going, hey, it's a lot of effort and resource from API teams and software developers and engineers to be connected to these channels directly. And so I think the channel management community, really saw a lot of folks going, hey, we're having to furlough people, we're having to lay off, we're having to do these things. And it really doubled down and reinvested in channel management, with regards to companies to helping, clients stay on top of their, spread of different channels and what they could be connected to, because, the game only got more intense with regards to like how many eyeballs are seeing your product during COVID, right? Because you had to get it, be as prevalent on every channel as you possibly could, and specifically in the VR channels. And so I think it became something where a lot of companies had to say, hey, look, this has been nice on the direct connection, but let's just do this with somebody else and keep a couple of connections here and get some of these other ones done, because we need to manage our resources a little better. And they also realized too that, the speed in which, a specialty channel manager does with their connections can be faster and a lot better sometimes. So, um, that's, little bit of long-winded answer, but I think that's kind of the reality.
Yeah, I think you're right. Where a lot of people is travel comes back, is multi-channel strategy is going to become a major aspect again. We have a lot of Airbnb entrepreneurs who are just exploring multi-channel strategy. We have a lot of companies who seeing the risk of not being competitive across a number of channels, how that these kind of macro events can affect them. But on the other side of the coin, we're actually starting to see some resistance. I think anecdotally and at a personal level through different clients we've worked with, we've found that, Expedia really isn't onboarding new
Mm-mm.
clients.
Yeah, they hadn't been.
They basically are saying just sign up through VRBO. Um, we're seeing that people I think a lot of anecdotal stories about Airbnb's customer and PM support, those teams have been cut down drastically. They're not near as responsive. And if you have an API connection that needs support, you're finding yourself not able to get that support. So I think that this environment that we're going to see is on the property manager side. People are going to be wanting to explore multi-channel strategy in more depth, but we've gone backwards from the channel side. They have less resources to
Yes.
spend on smaller PMs to do that, and it really puts the the channel manager is back in focus because the channel
Yeah.
managers are operating at such a scale that they can have very consistent support.
Yeah, I think to a couple of things to hit on there too is that, you know, the channels, you know, they haven't lost sight of helping the smaller guys. It's just, I think what you're hitting at that is a big piece is the expediency to replying, responding, answering tickets, being more involved in those businesses to help them optimize and do the better things and best practices. And I think what you're getting at there is a lot of that stuff has been kind of somewhat redirected back towards the channel managers who have that knowledge and expertise to really help those clients be optimized and know what to do on the channels, because the channels can't necessarily support that in the same, you know, speed and whatnot for it. And let's not forget too, I mean, it's funny, we, you know, people think like, you know, booking.com, Airbnb, Vrbo, Expedia, you know, all these different channels, you know, are big players and they have big, huge, you know, publicly traded and, you know, big money and all this other stuff. But I think COVID challenged everybody in the space, in the travel space, hotels, channels, property management companies, everything, to really kind of have a little bit of an identity realization, like, who am I as a company? Who is my customer now? Who is purchasing our product? Who's using our channel to, you know, our services to purchase this product? And it really had an identity shift that everybody had to kind of adjust to and realize what we're doing and change their prioritization. And so I think that was something of an aha moment for me with the channels, is like they really had to understand, re-understand who their customer is and what they're needing, which shifted a lot of stuff and a lot of behaviors.
Yeah, I'd always felt like Booking.com over the last 5 years had really made the biggest effort to understand our space and build flexibility into their platform. But as we
Yeah.
go forward, what do you think are some things that we should maybe be expecting from some of the larger channels in the post-COVID world? You know, Expedia, Booking, Airbnb. We mentioned before that Expedia like isn't even taking new customers, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Booking.com, I think, still is. But what do you some things think we should be expecting from these as PMs start to open up to this idea as well?
You know, I think I mean, and I don't have any of the absolute insight, detail, or knowledge of what exactly they're doing, but my understanding and experience is kind of telling me that with that kind of identity kind of shift or understanding of what they are and who their customer, I think we're going to see some new initiatives from some of these channels that are going to be drastic changes in regards to, like, you know, adapting to the new environment of things. Because there's a lot of people out there that, you know, I think maybe have the belief that, okay, we got vaccines rolling out, stuff's there, everything is going to be fine, like everything's going to go back to the way it was. And I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think anything is going to go back to exactly the way it was. I think it could be better in some aspects. I mean, I saw a video on social media that was showing that Disneyland released, I think they released their mask mandate or something. And there was a line just, I think probably miles, I don't even know, but probably miles of people waiting to get in the park because that was lifted. So maybe we'll see these huge surges of demand that are going to shift the way that, you know, certain channels decide to brand and market and actually have certain services and offerings for clients to advertise with and do things with. So, I mean, I've even heard that Expedia is already starting to accept some clients and some accounts and properties and things being back added in. So maybe there's a shift there that they've been working on in this time to figure out, you know, what they're going to do with certain things. But you're right. I would say that, like, you know, Booking.com's done a great job of adapting to the space and understand what's going on. Airbnb obviously is doing their thing. Vrbo has done a relatively good job, and I think I even saw our good friend Richard Vaughn. He posted a post on LinkedIn, said something about it was a redirect from another site about 7 new things that are coming to Vrbo. But I think that's something that we can expect with the channels, is that they're going to come out with some new stuff and new features and things. They're going to adapt to the new state of what they're going to forecast of what's going to happen.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they start to deal with the trend of mid and long-term stays, because previously they had limited that. There's
Yeah.
you know, hotels are pretty traditionally adverse to that because to a certain degree we operate in a gray area. Technically, in most areas, if you're taking a stay longer than 30 days, you're creating a tenancy relationship, which is
Yeah.
problematic, right? We get around it because most people just abide by it. But there is a liability there, and it'll be interesting to see how they start to deal with that, particularly as they have to deal with VAT, VAT taxes change in that regard as well. Do you think like between the big hotel channels that they're going to go back to the kind of level of support they had for the smaller PMs in our space, or do you think they're going to use this opportunity to kind of redefine their strategy to do connections through larger channel managers and PMSs primarily, and engage less with the
Yeah.
individual PM?
I think it's a bit of both, honestly. I mean, I think a lot of it is going to be them trying to figure out again, who they are, and what they want to do for the certain clients. But I think it's this whole pandemic and everything that's happened from a channel and a property management perspective has challenged people to try and be more efficient. I mean, you think about the simple nature of like companies like Google and WeWork and Amazon and all that stuff that made those initiatives and commitments to saying all employees can work from home, don't have to return to the office for however long it was, right? And they started realizing, wow, productivity was just as good. In some instances, productivity was better. So taking that as an example in some of those aspects, that might be something that actually influences how channels decide to do customer service and support for small and big PMs, and how they choose to focus their time and their efforts, because maybe they can be more efficient with less, or build some better automation to keep amount of call volumes or requests or tickets down. I think it's a huge opportunity that jump started the need for continued automation for a lot of what property management companies do, honestly. And I think that's hopefully that's something that at Rentals United we're striving to try and do at some point too, is just to make things more efficient and easier for people to do business, honestly.
What about Airbnb? They're public now, and I know that there's a
Yeah.
lot of people we talk to in the industry, a lot of new entrepreneurs who really have, been enabled to become entrepreneurs through Airbnb, and are pretty much channel loyalists for the most
Yeah.
part. I think that's starting to break down a little bit. Airbnb exerts a lot of control. I just found out, I was talking with someone about ADA service animal requirements, and I was talking to them about the ADA, and they pointed out to me that emotional support animals, by the ADA, which is the American Disabilities Act, I
Disabilities Act,
believe,
yeah.
service animals have certain protections that aren't emotional support animals aren't protected by. According to Airbnb policies, they actually expand that. They require you to follow ADA for emotional support. You can't
Yeah.
do that. So, Airbnb already exerts a little bit of control over their inventory, more so than some of the other channels that we see. Now that they're public, what do you think might be coming down the pipe from these folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting component, because like, when companies go public, there's a lot more to answer to, right? There's a lot more to consider. There's a lot more, um, what do you call that? Like, the entrepreneurial aspect of maybe Airbnb as a startup, or whatever you want to call it at the time before, was like they can make quick decisions, they could do things quickly and see the impacts and see how it goes. And now there's probably a little bit more of a longer tail to new initiatives and things they want to do that have to go through different areas and things to get approval or whatever. And so I think there's going to be, in my opinion, I think maybe the flexibility of Airbnb as a channel before, with regards to like certain restrictions, like you mentioned, with like service animals and things like that, those are going to get probably thought about a little bit more, and making sure that they're doing what's right for their shareholders and everything else that needs to happen. So I don't suspect that there'll be a lot of drastic changes coming from Airbnb like it had before. I'm hopeful that some of the things where I experienced in my previous history, and you did too, where like Airbnb would launch something and there really wasn't very much good communication about it, and everybody's like, wait, what, this changed and this happened, oh wow, okay, gotta change my strategy or adapt this or do whatever. I'm hopeful that that won't be as prevalent anymore, not just with Airbnb, but some of the other channels, the smaller channels that aren't publicly traded. Maybe there'll be more communication about it. That would be really nice and helpful. But I think going back to what you were first talking about, Airbnb has been controlling a lot of demand for people during COVID. I mean, they have just really done well. And I think what is now starting to challenge people is, I'm hearing from clients is, you know, Airbnb's got, 70, 80% of my bookings, like, and that makes me feel nervous, right? Because what if something happens to my connection with Airbnb, or what happens if, for some other reason it goes down for a day? That becomes a big impact when you have all your eggs in one basket. And I think I've talked about it before on our podcast here, but diversifying your channel footprint is the best way to keep, some safety risks in place for your business, for whatever reason it may be, right? Because, each channel is different. So I don't know if you've been hearing that kind of thing or not either, but I think those loyalists are probably coming up with that a little bit, or like, hey, all my eggs are in one basket.
Yeah, I haven't heard it as much as I've been telling people, because as a revenue manager, we distribution is really integrated with revenue management in ways that maybe aren't obvious to people at different phases of the company. But it's a significant risk for a revenue manager when your distribution channels are really eggs in one basket, because we know from experience that these channels break things. Things
Yeah.
break, and sometimes you don't notice, but sometimes 2 or 3 days of cutting off your flow really has a significant impact on your cash flow. A little less with Airbnb because of how they control cash, but
Yeah.
your revenue is impacted. If you don't sell for a week, then it affects all of your future rate positions.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to react to that. And what we know particularly is if something breaks more permanently or changes more permanently, you cannot spin up a channel that you're not optimized
No.
on quickly. So
No.
if you are doing 80 or 90% or more through Airbnb, and something that I really think that Airbnb is going to shift to a commissioning the PM model now that
Yep.
they're public. They're in a space where they are a channel. They're competing with all these, Booking.com and Expedia. These people are all billing the PM
Yes.
on the back end. And I just don't see a world where they continue to do that, like continue to
No.
charge more for the same product that is visible, especially once nobody's really talking about this. Maybe we'll do a whole episode on like what will happen if and when Google enters this space, you
Yes.
know, and can show all these prices and knows how to map them all together in ways that, Expedia and Booking.com haven't been able to figure out, and Airbnb also. And we've already heard from clients that Airbnb is talking to them about rate parity. And,
Yeah.
those things come along with billing the PM. And so if you don't have a multi-channel strategy, you're setting yourself up to be very surprised by suddenly taking a 10 to
Yeah.
15% cut out of your cut. And if you don't have a way to both adjust your rate strategy to deal with that and still remain competitive in the marketplace, I mean, the market's not just going to go up 15% because your costs went up 15%.
Right.
That's going to be a margin compression for you. You know what
It
I mean?
really is.
And I just think that, a bunch of property managers, if they're not at least being aware of that as a possibility, you could be stuck in a situation where your entire margin dries up and you're 3 or 4 months away from being able to change your distribution strategy. And that could sink a company.
Well, and I think, there's a couple of things there too with it, is like, you know, like you said, that they have that pricing that's hitting the host on the back end. Well, there's a couple of components to that, because I have a gut feeling too that, being that Airbnb is getting kind of into the space with Booking and Expedia as far as being publicly traded and becoming a really a relevant channel, fully, for more than just a short term or potential thing. I mean, they're going to be this is like, Airbnb is not going anywhere ever. Like, they're going to be there forever, right? And my thought is like, how long until maybe they start considering not being merchant on record? You know what I mean? How long until they start considering, hey, we'll allow people to book and pass through their credit card information, just like Expedia and Booking do. And Expedia and Booking also have, their merchant on record thing for them to be, the Stripe thing for Booking, and Expedia traveler preference and stuff like that. But I wonder when Airbnb might offer up that same diversity of modeling that allows people to take it and be merchant on record. Because sometimes with Airbnb being merchant on record, it's a little bit handicapping for companies because of dealing with cancellations and how to deal with modifications and things like that. So I think you bring up a really, really interesting point with regards to that modeling on the backside and how they tend to address it going forward, being, publicly traded.
Yeah. I think that the margin compression becomes some of the biggest things for companies to consider in the post-COVID world. Uh, Airbnb, I really think people should be aware that there's that I mean, we're already seeing it in some markets in Europe where they are doing that. So
Hmm.
it's not even like a pipe dream. Like the infrastructure
No.
is there. And I do think that people should expect that they'll start to lower the price, the additional price to the consumer and take it off the back end. Because if you're a experienced, publicly traded company business guy, you're probably looking at booking.com and Expedia and going, why are we raising the price on the same product when we can just bill the PM? We have all the money.
Yeah.
Like we pay them. So like, I don't think that that's that far off, quite frankly. And what I do think is we may start to see some bifurcation in their portfolio where they may start to differentiate between professional property managers and non-professional property managers in a much more clear way. And what they're
Yeah.
going to do is put significantly more burdens on professional property managers. And that will probably come with one, starting commissioning them slowly, but maybe not extending that to the amateur operators.
Hmm.
Two, developing requirements that are more standardized that everyone has to do, and probably checking them. If you're
Yeah.
they can't go to every individual listing and validate everything, but if you're a professional operator, they can check 2 or 3 of your listings and require that. And I
Yeah.
imagine that they'll start to do that to build, and then eventually turn that into a marketing thing where they have you get some benefit of like, hey, these are the professionals that if you want to stay with. I would see that as being something that comes down the pipe in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
On the hotel channels, we understand that they got to grow too. And I think where we're going to see that particularly is, and some of this has already started, I think, Doug, but the
Yeah.
inclusiveness of fees
Yeah.
is where the compression is going to occur on margin for property managers. Is I know Expedia is already kind of doing this. I think Booking.com, when we were with Stay Alfred, was talking to us a lot about it and maybe
Yep.
had already started to implement it, but basically making it so that you can't exempt your fees from commissionability.
Right. And I think that, the back when that was happening and things were changing in that way, it was because there were quite a few bad players. And I think it was in the hotel side of things that really caused the problem for everybody. It's that 1% kind of brush that, gets painted across 99% of everybody else. Right. I mean, there were some folks that were doing resort fees at certain hotels that really didn't have, like, maybe didn't even have a pool, maybe had like a rec room or something, and then they were charging like a really ridiculous amount of a resort fee to try and help offset the commission costs, and then keep it that way. And it was just kind of like, so that's where the bad eggs kind of made it hard for everybody else, is because then they say, okay, well, we're charging commission on fees, because it was just kind of a, hey, we don't you're taking away the benefit of what the OTA is. The OTA isn't trying to be super greedy with it. I mean, they have to make money because it's their business, but their marketing arm is so much powerful than any individual company, unless you're Hilton or Marriott. I mean, like that, or I mean, maybe Hyatt too or something. But the reality is, their marketing footprint can market your product for cheaper than you can do it yourself, for the amount of conversion and the type of reservations you get. So it's like people who just try to cheat that with putting in extra fees to offload their commission costs to customers and stuff like that. It really just makes it bad, for everybody else. But I mean, people just, the thing I tell a lot of people all the time is just like, you've got to look at OTAs and channels as an extension of your marketing strategy, because there's no way that you have enough marketing spend and budget to go do the type of SEO that will dominate the search results to get you bookings like those channels will do.
Yeah, I mean, a direct booking strategy is always going to be
Mm-hmm.
one of the clutch things, but it takes time to develop. And
Oh yeah.
in the meantime, you have to have the flexibility, and that means, one, um, get some properties on the channels. There's a world, like, well, it's not hypothetical. There absolutely is a world where
Yeah.
you probably don't want to immediately shift your channel. It's going to reduce, it's going to compress your margin,
Yeah.
especially if you're doing well currently. But you need to be in a position to already have some infrastructure built to
Yeah.
rebalance your distribution when the time comes.
You
Because
need to have your
if you
fail
have to start,
safes.
yeah, if you're going to start from scratch, you're really going to have a hard time. These channels are complex. You cannot spin these things up quickly, especially
No.
when we take into account the fact that Expedia, Booking.com, Airbnb, they've all restricted their resources to help you. You
Yeah.
know, they don't like. I remember trying to figure out some stuff on Booking.com with a customer, and they hid their ability to contact them so much deeper in their help center than it used to be. It used
Yep.
to just be like if you were on any page, they were like, send us a message, and now it's like you have to get through like 3 articles to get
Yes.
to one link hidden that says, "Fine, send us a message."
Yeah. Seriously, you've had to like reinvent. Like you used to be able to like in the Booking.com extra that I know for example, you used to be able to find phone numbers readily available that you could call to talk to customer service. And I appreciate why they had to suppress it because of furloughs and layoffs and everything else. But yeah, you're right. You had to find different ways to like go to this screen to go to that screen, and then finally you'd find a phone number somewhere or something that you could try and reach out to. But yeah, it's fascinating how the channels have tried to adopt in a way that is, some in some aspects is really great for a lot of people, but in a lot of aspects it's been really really trying and tough in opportunities. And I think another piece to what you're hitting at is that, you know is made the channel management community much more relevant again is the fact that they already have established connections. So when you connect to a channel manager and you go ahead and activate your properties, you're leveraging the power of your channel manager like Rentals United. You're leveraging your power of your connection with us to get bookings and get new channels on relatively quickly. Rather than if you were doing it yourself, or in some cases, some of your PMSs don't have necessarily as robust a connection as we do. And that kind of impacts the ability to do it. So I
Yeah.
think it's very important that you have some form of channel management strategy within your repertoire of what you're doing, because you need those components in order to get fast, like you said.
Well, we're kind of getting towards time. I want to
Yeah,
touch on one more topic. I know we have a bunch we could talk about, but
sure.
you mentioned some things that have really changed with COVID, and I want to ask, from the revenues manager's perspective, what do we think is going to stick around after COVID? And cancellation policies being, I think, the two
Mhm.
big ones. I think let's talk about cancellation policy, but also mid and long term kind of stay. But cancellation policy is an interesting one because as a revenue manager, I actually think we've had a really major benefit in our space of having a much stricter cancellation and payment policy procedure than
Mhm.
hotels. I mean, you talk to hotels and they're always like, man, we wish we could do it you. That's really
Yeah.
retracted,
Yeah.
especially in urban environments. The STR really has had to compete with that kind of hotel environment. And as a revenue manager, my hope is like, hey, I'm planning to be able to push this back out. But I don't know. I don't know if the marketplace is going to accept that, which
Yeah.
is
I
which
don't
is
think so.
unfortunate, and it does change revenue strategy.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think I don't know. I think the cancellation shift. I mean, I know before COVID hit and I was at Stay Offered, as you know, like we were really trying to get into that flexible rate plan section and charge a premium on that flexible rate plan because it was something even at that time that like business travelers were really wanting it because they wanted to have the flexibility of booking a vacation rental where they were at in a downtown urban market because that's what, Stay Offered product was. But they wanted to book something and know that if their plans changed, they could cancel on it and be within a policy. And, I think that only got even more serious with regards to COVID because people, needed to make sure that they could take their COVID tests and have the stuff ready and their family they're going to meet or, whatever they were doing, colleagues or anything like that. And they needed to know they had some flexibility instead of feeling like they were so constrained on their own personal finances or whatever they were doing. But I think the flexible stuff is going to stick around. I just think that people need to not see it as a threat and actually diversify it because on channels like Expedia and Booking.com, you can build multiple rate plans. And that also dovetails in something too. I think that maybe Airbnb and Vrbo should probably start considering that if they haven't already internally in some quiet room, think about adding multiple rate plans into an existing listing that allows people to not be totally committed to just one cancellation policy they set for the listing, but have like a flexible and a non-flexible. Um,
I actually totally agree with that. And it really does tie into the other point about this trend of mid and long-term stays appearing.
mm-hmm.
And it's we kind of have a couple pieces that aren't fitting together. On the vacation rental side, most of us are limited by the listing only holding a single um, uh, cancellation policy. And because things have gotten more flexible, the problem we have is people are staying long term, but we really need to be able to offer a different cancellation policy, because having someone cancel a 30-night stay the day before is devastating for a PM.
Terrible.
And right now on the VR channels, there's no capability to have, you can do your length of stay discounts, but you can't have a length of stay cancellation policy related to it too. And that really, we need to see that on those channels. On the flip side, the hotel channels have all this capability, but our software can't deliver it. Vacation rental software isn't delivering these different things unless you use an intermediary. And if you have the capability to use, I know it with Stay Alfred, we did all of that through the channel manager, because we know that those channels have the capability, but there's still limitations, because you have to have the sophistication to be able to develop all of these breakpoints among all these kind of strung together softwares. And at some point, if we see both cancellation remaining more flexible and long and short term becoming integrated into the transient sales channels, which I think is also likely, we're going to need a little bit of an expansion on both sides, hotel and VR, of capabilities.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's just another layer and component to adding to the flexibility, just flexibility in general of the channels, having to adapt and just really take it head on. They got a unique, especially the vacation rental channels. They have a unique opportunity right now to really, take it to some of the more hotel type channels, or the hotels in general, right? Really not the hotel channels, but the hotels, like, stick it to them, right? The hotels really lobby against short-term rentals and things in certain areas. And it's like, this is the time for short-term rentals to really strike back. And hopefully some of the short-term channels can actually help with that effort to really gain back.
I totally agree. I think that the channels like Airbnb and the STR channels are much more better positioned to develop the industry flexibly. And the hope is maybe they'll see that we need some of these things, and that also our property manager connections can push these as well. I mean, it has to come from our side. We are the core product, and we have to be able to tell Airbnb, like, look, we need to be able to deliver a different cancellation policy to stays over 7 days. We need the PMSs to actually build that capability. We know some of them can do it, but it's just how that goes out is going to be different for every channel. So at some point, there probably needs to be some of that standardization. We'll just see who leads the way.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, we're getting on time here, so why don't we talk a little bit, just a reminder of who we are and who we represent, and then if anyone has any ideas, reach out to us directly on LinkedIn or whatever, and we're happy to be open to topics to talk about. There's a lot in this space, and we really enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely.
So Doug, why don't you go first?
Sure. So yeah, I'm the head of revenue success for Rentals United, trying to create some clearer transparency for our clients in terms of data, performance, booking performance, things like we're working on health cards right now to actually show you what your content health looks like and help you understand a little bit more about what your product is and how it's going out there. And then the main core of Rentals United obviously is channel management. We have 60 plus connections worldwide. Lots of PMS connected partners as well, API also. And we're here to help you, elevate your revenue management strategy through distribution and channel management solutions. Keep your eggs not in one basket, but multiple baskets, and then also get the ease of the bookings coming through and the transparency from us to show you what your bookings are doing and how they're doing. So, but we're here to help you and all your initiatives. So
awesome. And my name's John deRoulet. I'm a revenue management expert at Wheelhouse and leading their enterprise sales. So please reach out if you're looking at the current environment and wondering, maybe we need to do something about pricing and revenue management. We really offer a platform that, has the best algorithm for demand-based pricing. We use both a price-based model as well as a booking model. So I know we've heard from a number of people in the space, the newcomers that are coming in this side, hey, we saw these old guys and we really think you need a booking-based model. Just so you know, Wheelhouse has had a mature booking-based model for 6+ years, and it's only getting better with partnerships like Key Data as we ingest more and more transactional data. So if you're looking for a really dynamic listing-specific pricing recommendation platform that also has a strong focus on usable UI for property managers of 1 unit to thousands of units, come and give me give me a call, and we'll chat about how we can help your portfolio.
Yeah, awesome.
Awesome, guys. Well, thanks for your time, and we look forward to the next one.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Doug. Bye, guys.